I tried really hard to write a Dharma talk this morning. And what I discovered was that, well, let me start here. Let me back up a little bit. As many of you know, we here at Houston Zen Center are in the middle of a series of teachings called Tea with Dogen. So Eihei Dogen, for those who are not familiar with him, Eihei Dogen is the founder of our Soto school of Zen in Japan. So he traveled to China and brought the teaching back from China to Japan, where he established it there. And then centuries later, it's made its way to the West. And here we are today. And so Dogen was a voluminous writer. He wrote many, many, many fascicles, many essays, he had many teachings. And we are going, in 2025, we at the Houston Zen Center are going through these teachings one by one and exploring them together. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be speaking about an essay that Dogen wrote called Bukkyo. Bukkyo is, the most common translation for Bukkyo is Buddhism. But in this case, it might be better translated as the teaching of the Buddhas. So it's not about a singular Buddha, it's about all the Buddhas and their teachings. But before I get into that, I'd like to read a quick story. I'd like to tell a quick story. And then what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to read a portion of this fascicle by Dogen with very few interruptions from myself. And hopefully it will come to life and we can all expound on it in the question and answer period. So that's going to be the format for today's talk. So let's begin with a really old story. This is a famous Zen story. It's collected in a few different collections of Zen stories. The one I'll be reading from today is from a collection of stories called The Gateless Gate. And here's how the story goes. It goes, it's called Buddha Picks Up a Flower. In ancient times, at the assembly on Vulture Peak, Buddha picked up a flower and showed it to the crowd. Everyone was silent except for the saint Kashyapa, who broke out in a smile. Buddha said, "I have the treasury of the eye of truth, the ineffable mind of nirvana, the most subtle of teachings on the formlessness of the form of reality. It is not defined in words, but is specially transmitted outside the doctrine. I entrust it to Mahakashyapa the elder." That's the story. I think I'll read it again. In ancient times, at the assembly on Vulture Peak, Buddha picked up a flower and showed it to the crowd. Everyone was silent except for the saint Mahakashyapa, who broke out in a smile. Buddha said, "I have the treasury of the eye of truth, the ineffable mind of nirvana, the most subtle of teachings on the formlessness of the form of reality. It is not defined in words, but is specially transmitted outside of doctrine. I entrust it to Mahakashyapa the elder." So, this is kind of one of Zen's origin stories. Zen finds its beginnings at that moment, at the moment when the Buddha transmitted something wordless to Mahakashyapa, his disciple. And the story goes that mysterious wordless transmission was then passed from Mahakashyapa to Ananda and on and down through ancestors and generations until it reached Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma is the monk who brought Zen from India to China in the 5th or 6th century. And by the time it reached Bodhidharma, there had been a set of what could be called Zen slogans formed around this story, or perhaps it could be called the statements. Is anybody familiar with the 4 statements of Zen? The 4 statements of Zen? The 4 statements of Zen, again, authored by Bodhidharma, supposedly, and they go as follows. They say that what Zen is a special transmission outside the scriptures with no reliance on words and letters, a direct pointing to the human mind and the realization of Buddhahood. A special transmission outside the scriptures with no reliance on words and letters, a direct pointing to the human mind and the realization of Buddhahood. So Bukkyo, this essay by Dogen, takes up this story and these slogans and interrogates them in a very Dogen way. So what I'm going to do now is, as I said, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what Dogen had to say about these slogans and this story, and I will add comments as I can. The realization of the truth of the Buddhas is the Buddha's teaching. The realization of the truth of the Buddhas is the Buddha's teaching. So right off the bat, what this is telling me is that the teachings of Buddha, of which there are countless, are not something that we study in order to amass knowledge. They're something that we perhaps learn to put into practice, and it's not until we can put these teachings into practice in our own lives that the teaching has really been transmitted. So, the realization of the truth of Buddhas is the Buddha's teaching. So that's the Buddha's teaching, is the realization of the Buddha's teaching. Because Buddhist ancestors perform it for the benefit of Buddhist ancestors, the teaching authentically transmits it for the benefit of the teaching. This is the turning of the wheel of Dharma. Inside the eye of this wheel of Dharma, the teaching causes Buddhist ancestors to be realized and causes Buddhist ancestors to enter parinirvana. Those Buddhist ancestors, without fail, possess manifestation in a single atom and possess nirvana in a single atom. They possess manifestation through the whole universe and possess nirvana through the whole universe. They possess manifestation in a single instant and possess manifestation through the ocean of abundant kalpas. So the Buddha that Dogen is talking about here is neither big nor small, neither lives for an instant nor for an infinity. Yet their manifestation in one atom at one instant is utterly without incomplete virtue. So their manifestation in one small space does not indicate that their virtue is incomplete. And their manifestation through the whole universe, through the ocean of abundant kalpas, is never an effort to make up a deficiency. So the universality of our Buddha is not undertaken in order to make up for some lack. It's just how the Buddha is. For this reason, we never say that Buddhas who realize the truth in the morning and then pass into nirvana in the evening are lacking in virtue. If we say that one day is of a meager virtue, then the human span of 80 years is not long. And when we compare the human span of 80 years with 10 kalpas or 20 kalpas. It may be like the relation between 1 day and 80 years. The virtue of this Buddha or that Buddha may be indistinguishable. So this Buddha and that Buddha in this case could mean the Buddha present today and the eternal Buddha. The virtue of this Buddha or that Buddha may be indistinguishable. When we take the virtue which belongs to a lifetime of long kalpas and the virtue in 80 years and try to compare them, we might be unable to arrive at even doubt. For this reason, the Buddha's teaching is just teaching a Buddha. It is the perfectly realized virtue of a Buddhist patriarch. It's not true that the Buddhas are high and wide while the Dharma teaching is narrow and small. Remember, when Buddha is big, the teaching is big. And when Buddha is small, the teaching is small. So remember, the Buddha and the teaching are beyond measures of big and small. They are beyond such properties as good, bad, and indifferent. And they are not for self-teaching or for the teaching of others. Some fellow has said, Old man Sakyamuni, besides expounding the teaching in the sutras throughout his life, also authentically transmitted to Mahakasyapa the Dharma of the one mind, which is the supreme vehicle, and this transmission has passed from rightful successor to rightful successor. So the teaching is opportunistic idle chatter, but the mind is the essential true reality. This authentically transmitted one mind is called the separate transmission outside the teachings. It is not to be likened to the discussion of the three vehicles and the 12 divisions of the teaching. Because the one mind is the supreme vehicle, we speak of direct pointing to the human mind and seeing the nature and becoming Buddha. So that's the position taken by the story we opened with, right? And with the 4 statements of Zen. Is that in addition to teaching for 40 some odd years, as the Buddha did, he also transmitted something else to Mahakasyapa, which was the Dharma of the one mind, which is the supreme vehicle. So this teaching that the Buddha did for these 40 odd years is so much idle chatter as compared to this direct transmission from mind to mind. Dogen does not agree. He says, this expression is never about the everyday conduct of the Buddha Dharma. So this expression is not about the day-to-day reality of Buddhism. It lacks, I love this phrase, it lacks the vigorous road of getting the body free. It lacks the vigorous road of getting the body free, and it has no dignified behavior throughout the body. So this to me says it lacks the vigorous road of actual liberation. Without the teaching, we don't see a path in front of us towards liberation. Mind-to-mind transmission, pardon me, without the teachings of the Buddha, those cannot be discarded. Otherwise, there is no path that we will be able to see in front of us. And he says, fellows like this, even hundreds or thousands of years ago, were proclaiming themselves to be leading authorities, but we should know that, if they had such talk as this, they neither clarified nor penetrated the Buddha's Dharma and the Buddha's truth. Why not? Because of not knowing Buddha, not knowing the teaching, not knowing the mind, not knowing inside, and not knowing outside. This not knowing is due to never having heard the Buddha Dharma. Now, they talk of the Buddhas without knowing what their substance and details are, and without even studying the borders of the Buddha's going and coming. That being so, they do not deserve to be called the Buddha's disciples. The reason they say that Buddhas authentically transmit only the one mind without authentically transmitting the Buddha's teaching is that they do not know the Buddha Dharma. Not knowing the one mind as the Buddha's teaching, not knowing the Buddha's mind, not knowing the one mind as the Buddha's teaching, and not hearing the Buddha's teaching as the one mind. They say that there is a Buddha's teaching outside of the one mind. Their one mind, never having become the one mind, they say that there is a one mind outside the Buddha's teachings. It may be that their Buddha's teachings have never become the Buddha's teaching. Although they have transmitted and received the fallacy of a separate transmission outside the teachings, because they have never known inside and outside, the logic of their words is not consistent. How could the Buddhist patriarchs who received the one-to-one transmission of the Buddha's right Dharma-eye treasury fail to receive the one-to-one transmission of the Buddha's teaching? Still more, why would old man Sakyamuni Buddha have instituted teachings and methods that could have no place in the everyday conduct of Buddhists? Old man Sakyamuni intended already to create teachings and methods to be transmitted one-to-one. What Buddhist patriarch would wish to destroy them? Therefore, the meaning of the one mind, which is the supreme vehicle, is just the 3 vehicles and the 12 divisions of the teaching. So the one mind, which is the supreme vehicle, is just the accumulated teachings. And it is just the Mahayana treasury and the Hinayana treasury. So Mahayana and Hinayana are 2 different schools of Buddhism, both of which have their own impressive canons of Buddhist teachings. Remember, because the Buddha's mind means the Buddha's... Remember, because the Buddha's mind means the Buddha's eye, a broken wooden dipper, all dharmas, and the triple world, therefore, it is the mountains, the oceans, and national lands, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Remember, because the Buddha's mind means the Buddha's eye, a broken wooden dipper, all dharmas, and the triple world, therefore, it is the mountains, the oceans, and national lands, the sun, the moon, and the stars. The Buddha's teaching means myriad phenomena and accumulated things. The meaning of outside is this concrete place having arrived. So the meaning of outside means right here. Right here. The authentic transmission is authentically transmitted from a self to a self, and so, within the authentic transmission, there is self. The authentic transmission is authentically transmitted from a self to a self, and so within the authentic transmission, there is self. The authentic transmission is authentically transmitted from the one mind to the one mind, and so in the authentic transmission, there must be one mind. The one mind, which is the supreme vehicle, is soil, stones, sand, and pebbles. Because soil, stone, sand, and pebbles are the one mind, soil, stone, sand, and pebbles are soil, stone, sand, and pebbles. If we speak of the authentic transmission of the one mind, which is the supreme vehicle, it should be like this. But the fellows who speak of a separate transmission outside the teachings have never known this meaning. Therefore, do not, through belief in the fallacy of a separate transmission outside the teachings, misunderstand the Buddha's teaching. If it were as those fellows say, might it be possible to speak of the teachings as a separate transmission outside the mind? It's getting a little hairy, isn't it? If it were, as those fellows say, might it be possible to speak of the teaching as a separate transmission outside the mind? How could there be a teaching outside the mind? If we spoke of its separate transmission outside the mind, not a single phrase nor half a verse could be transmitted. If we do not speak of a separate transmission outside the mind, we should never speak of a separate transmission outside the teachings.